We are joined now by another familiar face to our EWTN viewers. Joan Lewis served as EWTN's first Vatican bureau chief. She's lived in Rome for decades and continues to write about the latest Vatican news on her blog, joansrome.com. And this Jubilee year is her fifth one. Joan, thanks for being with us. This Jubilee year is especially memorable because amid the Jubilee activities, we also had a conclave and the election of a new pope. From what you've observed there in Rome, how do you think the funeral for Pope Francis and the beginning of Pope Leo's pontificate is impacting these Jubilee activities? Are there more crowds than usual, for example?
Oh, there certainly are. Well, first of all, it's great to be with you and share all the delights and the news of a Jubilee. But obviously, the death of a pope who seemed to be getting better, and then all of a sudden we wake up Easter Monday morning and find out that we are without a Holy Father. The shock waves went around the world, and then when we saw his funeral was planned for the weekend afterwards, April 26th, and the weekend of the 26th and 27th, that was supposed to be the weekend of young people, of teens, and the canonization of Carlo Acutis. Well, of course, that did not, there were young people in Rome, but I think even greater throngs. Those who had come stayed, and then even greater numbers of people came in, because it was something like 200,000 they estimated were at his funeral, and then another, in and around St. Peter's Square, and then another 150,000 watching his coffin being brought to St. Mary Major. And to be honest, the people that had stayed in Rome, I think a lot of them even remained while the cardinals gathered in Rome and the conclave was beginning, all the 9 days of mourning and all those events. And there were huge numbers of people that really stayed, that came to Rome. They were curious. They've never been here for something like the election of a pope. So when on May 8th, our new Pope Leo was elected, there were at least, and I was among them, at least 200,000 people in St. Peter's Square. Huge crowds that day, and then they just stayed. They've stayed for so many events.
Joan, we spoke with you as the Jubilee year was getting started, and now we're about at the midway point. What sights and scenes have stood out to you from this Jubilee year so far?
So delighted you asked, because in so many ways you'd have to imagine they were linked with the new pope. I mentioned earlier the huge numbers of people. What we've seen, 200,000 or more actually at his massive inauguration of the pontificate. And that was the day on which it was the Jubilee of confraternities. So beautiful confraternities from all over the world, people coming from Spain carrying Madonnas on huge flower-decked bases, amazing things. And then, by the way, the day he was, or for his first Regina Coeli, there was the Jubilee of Bands. So there was music greeting the Pope at every turn, and I loved that. And subsequent Jubilees, this very weekend, by the way, is the Jubilee of Grandparents. I just came back from a 3-day conference, the Catholic Grandparents Association. That was very exciting. So, but also what has really stood out are the numbers for the general audiences on Wednesday. Phenomenal. They're 40,000, 45,000. And those are Vatican figures. Sometimes the Vatican even underestimates compared to Rome. But so the Jubilees have stood out. People are still coming, and the ones, for example, those that wanted to see Carlo Acutis are going to have to wait for a date. The Pope will announce that date in mid-June of when Carlo Acutis' canonization will be, and we can expect huge crowds for that. But I think from now on, people are just they're really flowing into Rome out of curiosity for the new Pope.
The excitement can certainly be felt from Rome, even here. And Joan, I did want to ask you, the city of Rome was preparing for years for the crowds the Jubilee would bring, the crowds we've been discussing. How has the city stood up to all this activity?
Well, except for a few places in the city that are still kind of restoring areas, you know, for the Jubilee Year 2025, the city's doing pretty well. You really feel the crowds when, of course, you're around the Vatican, or some of the crowds at events. The Pope took possession of St. John Lateran Basilica, his cathedral church, just last Sunday. So you're going to have big crowds for that. And then, obviously, at St. Mary Major, he's made a couple visits. But I think in general, in talking to people who own restaurants and taxi drivers and hotels and so forth, the numbers aren't as big as they said. So we'll see what happens by the end of the year.
Definitely. And Joan, if there are Catholic families watching this right now thinking they might be interested in making a pilgrimage for the Jubilee before it concludes, a pilgrimage to Rome, any advice for them before it's too late?
Well, look at the calendar. Go on the Jubilee official site. You can find that. Just Google that. It's a Latin name. Go on the site. Look at what Jubilee events might be taking place if you want to be here for a weekend event. If not, if you simply want to, you can come in October, which is always a gorgeous month. Do so. You want to go through a holy door. And you know, Catholic means universal. Universal is what you see here. The people from all over the world, the languages that you hear. And so, you know, we are one body, one Christ, but we have different liturgies, we have different languages, and it's a beautiful thing to experience. And frankly, anytime you can be in the presence of a pope, it's a wonderful thing. And I just say to people, advising them, if you don't like crowds, have a little patience, pack good walking shoes, have some patience, and you know what? Be open to new things. Be open to listening, to watching people, and be open, as the Pope seems to be, to surprises.
I love that.
You'll be surprised.
Joan, as always, we are so grateful for your insights. Joan Lewis, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Come to Rome, everybody.
Gladly.